All right, so we're going to finish up the Pacific War. Here it goes. There's two, not four, two things to keep in mind here. Okay, on the one hand, you've got the Americans, and you've got the power of American industry, and you've got all the factories that are being that are fully engaged in the war effort, that are making money off of the war, producing ships. Most importantly, aircraft carriers. These are the ships that matter in this new age of naval warfare, aircraft carriers. And of course, what you need also is airplanes if you're going to have aircraft carriers. So we got 14 of these massive, enormous, football field long ships floating out here with the thousands of aircraft that are going to fly off of them. All right. Really, there is no way the Japanese can compete with our ability to produce war materials. Also, we have a lot more people than them. Also, we're incredibly determined to kick it to them because we want to get back at them for Pearl Harbor. All these things going together. So it's American industry and ingenuity. And it's running up against what's slowing down the inevitable American victory in the Pacific is that Bushido Code. Boom, they're hitting each other. The Japanese are not going to surrender. They're not going to do it. It's the most horrible thing they can imagine. It's much worse than death. So what is slowing down the inevitable American victory is that it's always running into that sheer determination of will of the Japanese soldier and civilian to resist surrender. Okay, now the course of the war in the Pacific, right? We talked about how, of course, it starts at Pearl Harbor in December of 41. That is the beginning of a Japanese offensive through the Pacific. Goes up to the Battle of Midway, the turning point. Then becomes an American offense, taking back territory from the Japanese. There's two campaign routes that the Americans are pursuing in the Pacific. There's a southern route, starting with the Solomon Islands, that Battle of Guadalcanal, moving up in the islands off Papua New Guinea, and by 1944 they are preparing to launch an assault to liberate the Philippines from the south. And Douglas MacArthur, the general who vacated the Philippines when it fell, is going to make a big deal about returning to the Philippines and liberating it. Okay, from the south. While that southern campaign is making progress in 42, 43, and 44, there's also a central campaign moving through the region of the Central Pacific. This is undertaken by the Navy and the Marines. And it depended, again, on that stupendous American industrial output, bigger and faster ships. They were taking these tiny little islands that were thousands of miles apart. There was no way they could have done this without building an entirely new navy with faster ships and better technology. Now, we move through the Marshall Islands into the Marianas Island chain. In the fight for the Marianas Island chains, one of the last islands to fall is Saipan. And it was here that American soldiers first saw the extent to which civilians as well as soldiers who were Japanese were committed to that Bushido Honor Code. Rather than surrendering to the Americans, there was a little bit of land left to the Japanese on Saipan. The people, civilians and soldiers, were leaping off the cliffs, killing themselves rather than surrendering. All right? Saipan fell to the Americans. Hard-fought battle, but it fell to the Americans in July of 1945. That opened the door for the Navy and the Marines to move from Saipan to the Philippines to connect with the southern wing. So now you've got the central campaign route and the southern campaign route are going to convene at the Philippines. And they begin their assault at the island of Leyte. An American pilot had crash-landed here, had survived, had escaped, and had reported that the island was not heavily garrisoned. So we're landing American troops on the island of Leyte. We're also sending the naval fleet in there after winning a big battle in the Philippine Sea. They come down to the Philippines to Leyte Gulf. All right. The Japanese are sending what's left of their navy down to defend the Philippines, and there's an enormous, enormous naval battle off the island at the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Again, the Bushido Code comes in here. This is the first time the Americans come into contact with the kamikaze pilot. Okay, this is a suicide pilot. He flies the airplane into the ships, the American ships, to sink them, to kill as many Americans as possible. These men are held in high, high honor. They begin their missions with ceremonies, with ritual prayer, with farewell poems. They are given the 1,000-stitch belt, it's called. This is a garment that 1,000 women have knit stitches into, that the kamikaze pilots put on. And the idea is that the women who made the belt have united themselves to the sacrifice of the warrior. They're honoring him, but they're also participating in the honor themselves through this gift of the belt. Okay. So these men are held in high honor, and they're terrifying to the Americans. Absolutely horrifying. All right. Now, once Leyte, we win the Battle of Leyte Gulf. It's another enormous American naval victory. So between the summer of 44 and the autumn of 44, when the attack on Leyte is taking place, we sink 7 Japanese aircraft carriers. Okay, and we are producing these things like, easy. Okay, well, not easy, but Okay, so anyway, again, American, we're gonna win. It's just a matter of time. We just gotta work through this Bushido thing. Now, look, from Leyte, they launched an attack to retake the main island in the Philippines, Luzon. And the fighting there is very, very hard in the capital, in Manila. It's street combat, street by street, block by block, hand-to-hand combat, building by building sometimes. And this is like similar to what was going on in Berlin a little bit later. Now, you lose 100,000 civilians in Manila in that battle. You lose several thousand Americans. But Manila falls to the Americans finally in March of 1945. This is, then you're going to have the liberation of the American soldiers, the prisoners of war who had originally been taken on the Philippines, who had survived the Bataan Death March, as well as liberation of American civilians who had been trapped in the Philippines when it fell. But a lot of American soldiers are liberated here as well. All right. Final 2 battles in the Pacific, Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Again, both of them demonstrate the extent to which the Japanese are going to refuse to surrender. On Iwo Jima, we're fighting there at the same time we're fighting in Manila. There are upwards of 20,000 Japanese defending that island, and nearly all of them die. We had to kill all of them. And it's really horrific, the things they had to do. Flamethrowers, launching flamethrowers down into caves, burning the people in them. The Japanese defenders won't get out. They refuse to vacate the cave. They won't give up. They're gonna, and so the fighting is just horrific. Okay, and then again, this is replicated on Okinawa in the summer of 1945. You can watch a little video about Okinawa. It's produced by HBO. It's connected to that the Pacific, the miniseries they produced. But it's clean. The video I'm giving you is clean. It's just some commentary. So don't worry about that. But it's going to kind of reinforce the experience that some of the soldiers had there on Okinawa. Okay. Once Okinawa falls in the summer of 45, the final element is going to be how we're gonna force the Japanese to surrender. It's going to have to be with an attack on the Japanese mainland, the home islands, and the Japanese government is committed at that point in the summer of 45 to a policy of no surrender. So this is going to be tough.